Ordinary multi-story building, almost on the outskirts of Chicago.
Do we really need so much equipment? It's so heavy.
My friend William was indignant, dragging a huge bag with all sorts of equipment for shooting. I was walking ahead and was already looking forward to an exciting conversation with an eyewitness of a real paranormal phenomenon. Actually, she lived on the 4th floor, and we were almost there. By the way, my friend and I are engaged in, let's say, collecting various tales and stories. And of course, we have a little extra cash flow with this craft from viewing our videos on YouTube, and the huge desire to become rich and famous in the future. We are looking for people who can tell us their real, terrible stories. Situations that they have experienced themselves, and for which they can't find an explanation. Sometimes the stories of people to whom we came to visit really scared us, causing an unpleasant feeling of discomfort. In some cases, even my voice broke when I, as a presenter, tried to ask another question to the narrator. But still, mostly when we listened to old men's stories, and some of them just made us sleepy. How did we find such people? This is easier than it may seem at first glance. There are dozens of forums where people describe very clearly what they faced. Usually, they are just ordinary schizophrenics, but among them, there are completely adequate people who were really worried about something inexplicable. We contacted such people, and if they didn't mind, we went to visit them. Of course, we tried to find stories in our big city, but sometimes we had to go way beyond it. The forum is just one of several ways to find the people we need. There were also grannies at the entrances, or sometimes we just had to wander through old random houses. Yeah, I know that it may look strange. Imagine such a situation, when 2 guys knock on your door and say,
Hello, was there any paranormal situation with you? Could you tell us about it on camera?
Such cases are quite rare, but still, we believed in what we were doing. And we believed that we could somehow help people, at least support them morally. The woman who will be discussed further, we found on one of the forums. She asked for help, asked someone to come to her as soon as possible, and take her away from her apartment. The topic was created on the forum 3 weeks ago. The text of the appeal was really strange. There were several mistakes in each sentence, a large number of exclamation marks, and so on. We analyzed the text and concluded that something really happened there. Most likely, the woman's hands were shaking while she was writing. She was scared, which is why she made mistakes and didn't think at all about how to correctly compose a sentence. We contacted her, first there on the forum, but then she gave us her number, and we called. Her voice was too calm. I was talking to her, and it seemed to me that she was either stoned or just had enough of a sedative. After I introduced myself, saying that I'm a journalist, and asked her some leading questions, she invited us to visit her, saying that she can no longer live like that, and she needs to tell someone about her trouble. I asked her about the forum, but she replied that no one responded except us. And now, 3 days later, we are already standing in front of her apartment. She didn't mind the presence of cameras and shooting equipment, without asking a single unnecessary question. This is the apartment we need. For some reason, I whispered to Will. Oh, finally. He breathed heavily. You know, I have a strange feeling.
What do you mean?
It seems to me that this will actually be a horrible story, not like all the previous ones.
I'm not sure. We'll see. The message on the forum was really strange. Maybe something really serious happened.
Maybe, but taking into account her normal voice, and the fact that she still lives in this apartment, I think everything will be fine.
You think so?
Yeah, I muttered, holding the bell button.
I'm coming.
There was a sound outside the door, A key turned in the old keyhole, and the door opened. In the hallway, there was a woman of maybe 40 or 45 years old. She was tall, dressed in some kind of colorful robe, which she usually wears at home. Some concern was clearly expressed on her face, and she didn't fully open the door and looked at us suspiciously. "Good evening, my name is Ethan. We called you a couple of days ago."
Are you from the internet?
The woman asked quietly, as if trying not to wake someone up. "Yes, we wrote you on the forum." She examined my friend and me once more and opened the door.
Come in. I'm sorry for all that mess.
"Don't worry, it's okay," I answered, smiling.
Come into the kitchen. Would you like some tea or maybe coffee?
With pleasure.
William's voice was heard from behind.
Miss Brown, where shall we set the equipment?
I was thinking about in the kitchen, but there is very little space, so let's probably set it in the living room. Oh, you came and my soul became calm.
She said this phrase very quietly, but I heard her, and goosebumps crept up my hands. "Will, come into the living room. Set the cameras and light."
Yeah.
He slung a bag over his shoulder and followed Miss Brown into the room. I stayed in the corridor and looked around the apartment. Yeah, she doesn't seem to be rich, although I'm already used to such interiors. The smell of the 90th has not yet disappeared here. The shabby old linoleum was carefully nailed to the floor with a stapler. The same shabby wallpapers, and more than once, painted doors to the bathroom and toilet. William's voice distracted me from looking at the apartment.
I'm almost ready.
1 minute, guys. I'll at least change my clothes.
Okay, we are waiting. A few minutes later, we were sitting at the table in the living room, and William was attaching a microphone to Miss Brown's collar. "Well, shall we start?" I asked.
Of course.
Emily replied, her voice trembling. William checked all the cameras one more time. "Miss Brown, I will ask you simple questions, and you are supposed to answer them. The questions relate only to your situation, okay?"
Yes, it's okay.
Let's start. "Good afternoon, dear friends. Today, we are in the apartment of a woman in whose house strange and inexplicable things happened. We came to her in order to find out firsthand what was really going on here. Miss Brown, please tell us how and when it all started." The woman looked uncertainly at one camera, then at the other.
It started a month and a half ago, in the same apartment, and continues to this day. I have never experienced such horror in my life. I can't sleep properly at night. I can't eat properly. I can't live normally. Something has settled in this apartment. Something very bad.
Raising her tone, she said, crossing herself. "Please tell me, what do you mean by bad?"
One day, I came home from work late and found dishes scattered in the kitchen. Everything I had there was lying on the floor. As if someone was looking for something, came to the kitchen and threw everything that was in the cabinets on the floor. Everything would be fine if I didn't live alone, or if there were any signs of a break-in or something. Everything in the apartment was in its place when I arrived, only this mess in the kitchen. I even thought that something was wrong with the cabinets. I checked everything 10 times, but it was fine. They are tightly screwed to the wall. I had to buy new dishes because not a single cup nor a plate was left intact. This was the very beginning.
So you think that this is some kind of paranormal phenomenon?
Of course. It is the only explanation I found. There could be no one at home except me, and there was no one that day. That same night, I heard the sound again.
What sound? I interrupted the woman.
My kitchen door is really old, and when you close it abruptly, a nasty creaking can be heard all over the apartment. So that night, it was this creaking that woke me up, and then a terrible, loud slam. I rushed into the hallway and found the door closed. Although it has been open for centuries, it was that night that I became really scared. I couldn't sleep until the morning. I had an obsessive feeling in my head that I wasn't alone in the apartment, that someone was here, Someone was watching me and doing dirty tricks in order to instill terror in me, and he definitely succeeded in it. Then everything just got worse and worse. On the third day, everything in the refrigerator went bad. I came home from work, and there were worms and rot. Even the vegetables have rotted, not to mention the meat and a big pot of soup, which I just cooked the day before. Everything was fresh. I had just bought up at the market. It's some kind of nightmare. I can call it just that.
I was gradually becoming anxious. Firstly, because Miss Brown told all this very emotionally. Judging by her words, this really happened and is happening now. This fact was the biggest difference from our past experience of meeting such people. They all told stories and described situations that happened to them several years ago, or even decades ago. Emily continued.
Spoiled food, broken dishes, and slamming doors are still nothing comparing to those incomprehensible things that began to happen.
I glanced briefly at my friend. He seemed to freeze, listening to our narrator.
I won't say exact dates, okay? I don't remember for sure.
Of course, no problem.
That night, I woke up again from the slam of the door, only this time not in the kitchen, but in the bathroom. Immediately, I jumped out of bed and stared towards the corridor. I swear I saw someone there.
After these words of hers, I was covered with goosebumps.
There was someone in the corridor. I was afraid to even breathe. I barely reached for the switch, since it was very close to the bed. Turned on the light, and it seemed to feel calmer. I went into the corridor. Absolute silence was there, the calm before the storm. And suddenly the bathroom was kicked down. I thought it would kill me. The sound was as if someone had thrown a grenade there. The door was torn off its hinges, and it flew towards me. But luckily, it hit the wall. I'll show you. I screwed it on my own as best I could. Come on, let's check.
She got up from the table and went into the hallway. Well, take the camera. We followed her. Indeed, the door was broken down. An ordinary fragile woman like her would definitely not have enough strength for this.
Look in the refrigerator. I went to the store today. At least a little food lives longer in the refrigerator. If you don't put it in there, it spoils as soon as I step over the threshold. Look, it's the same thing again.
I took a glance, and really the few products that were in the refrigerator were spoiled.
I just bought it today,
the woman repeated. Why don't you leave here? I asked her again.
Where should I go, son? I don't have anyone left. I buried my husband and son several years ago.
And what about your friends or maybe colleagues?
Oh, come on. Look at me. Who will shelter such an old woman? People have changed. Now they only think about themselves. No one needs me. And I'm sitting here not knowing what to do with this scourge.
She started to cry. I felt really sorry for her. I tried to calm her down and tell her that everything would be fine, but who the hell am I trying to fool? William temporarily turned off the camera. We tried in every possible way to calm down Miss Brown, and at one point my friend blurted out something about the priest. The woman immediately looked up at us.
I called the priest. I forgot to tell you that.
That's interesting. Turn on the camera.
A fat man in a cassock came here. He even didn't want to cross the threshold. When I gave him $100, he reluctantly mumbled something unclear and left, even without closing the door. But after his visit, the one who was here got angry.
Angry?
Yeah. At night, I saw him again. This time much longer. A silhouette was standing in the corridor. In the dark, I couldn't see him. I saw that someone was standing, and I couldn't understand who exactly. It stood there for a few seconds, and then it yelled at the whole house. I thought I would have a heart attack from the scream. I've never heard such a terrible voice in my life.
What was that voice? I asked.
It feels like it wasn't just one voice. There were several of them, and they were all different and seemed to merge into one. After this heart-rending scream, a real nightmare began. Furniture moved, chairs rose above the floor and flew into the walls. The chandelier swayed, the TV turned on by itself. Newly bought dishes were broken again. I don't know how I survived that night.
Her story made my mouth dry, and I could hardly ask her the following question. And don't you think that the phenomenon have already crossed the line, and something needs to be done? It's dangerous to live in this apartment.
I already told you guys that I simply have nowhere to go. The winter is coming, so I won't go live on the street.
Why don't you rent housing until everything gets better?
That's too expensive.
She interrupted me.
I work as a cleaner. I hardly have enough to buy food and pay the bills.
Suddenly, after these words, her face changed, and she moved a little closer to me and whispered,
And last night, I saw him very well, when my eyes were already accustomed to the darkness, but I was still awake. More precisely, not him, but her. It was just a black shadow. A shadow with 2 luminous beads in place of the eyes. Thick, matted hair. Very thin arms and legs. In general, it was a human silhouette. I turned on the light as soon as possible, and in those split seconds before she disappeared, I was able to see her. It was a woman with dark hair. Her head was held on an insanely long neck. Well, the neck itself was about 15 inches long, or even more. That's all I could see. Then she was gone.
I couldn't make a single sound, trying to fit everything that she had just told me in my head. Suddenly, she grabbed my hand and looked straight into my eyes.
Help me, guys. Help me. Make public everything that you just heard. Maybe there is a person who can help me, who can understand what is happening here.
Okay, we'll help. Turn everything off, Will. I exhaled and took off the microphone. Thank you very much, Miss Brown.
Thank you for agreeing to come. Let's go to the kitchen. I've made some tea.
With pleasure, I smiled. We went out of the room into the corridor, and a creaking sound reached my ears, as if someone was slowly opening the door of an old wardrobe.
Quiet,
Emily hissed. We froze, creating a silence in only which the beating of my heart and that creaking could be heard. And suddenly, the cabinet was torn off from the wall. It didn't fall, but as if someone took it off and threw it into another wall, scattering numerous dishes on the floor. The apartment was filled with a terrible crash and the noise of dishes falling on the floor. I've never been so scared in my life. The kitchen door slammed shut on its own after the cabinets with dishes.
Now you understand that I'm not lying. I'm telling the truth.
Wiping her tears, the woman spoke. We will help you. Already thinking about how to escape from here. I calmed her. Will collected all our equipment in a hurry. Suddenly, there was a short lull.
So guys, let's get out of here. I feel that it's about to start. I don't want you to get hurt.
In general, William and I left the apartment, and without saying a word, got into the car and drove away from this terrible place. We wanted to take this woman with us, but she flatly refused to leave, suspecting that it was not the apartment, but herself. A terrible awareness came to us later, when we began to review the footage already at my friend's house. Firstly, there was some strange interference on each video, despite the fact that we have quite expensive cameras, and this hasn't happened before. Secondly, in several filmed fragments, we clearly saw the one about whom the woman was talking. The black silhouette of a woman was everywhere. A few steps away, she was standing right behind Miss Brown. When I saw this, I was just taken aback. I couldn't drop a word. My whole body began to tingle with fear from the incredible horror of what had happened. But the story didn't end there. We didn't manage to edit and upload the video to YouTube. We were constantly faced with some problems. The computer flatly refused to open the source material. Then the internet was turned off, and YouTube itself refused to upload the video, giving out all sorts of errors that I had never seen in my life. As for the woman, we wanted to help her. We even rented an apartment ourselves and found a person who really understands these paranormal cases. But It was too late. Just a few days after our visit, Miss Brown was found dead at the entrance. She fell out the window and died. Everything was considered an accident. But I know, and my friend William knows what has happened, and that Miss Brown's death is far from an accident.